Jim, we are going today because there are changes. There are midseason changes. We have opinions on that. Penn State, Oregon State, UAB, our dear friend Trent Dilfer. 3 coaches out of a job as we enter week 8, just based on what happened over the weekend. A couple other coaches we know, UCLA's Deshaun Foster. A couple weeks ago, he was dismissed. I called UCLA's game with interim head coach Tim Skipper over the weekend at Michigan State. They're rolling. The Trojans are rolling. We got a lot to dive into. Let's just pause. How are you mid-season, my man?
Good. It's like you said, it's just crazy kind of keeping up with all this stuff because there's 8 jobs, right? Eight jobs now in FBS that are open. I think, is that the new, like every time something happens now in college football, it's like, oh, is this the new reality of this era of college football? Because NIL and portal and everyone trying to figure out the calendar and how all that stuff works. So it's each one of these moves are for somewhat different reasons. I think you can say, obviously, people at different places. I mean, it's not often that a team goes from, preseason number 2 to out of the ranking and out of their coach within like 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks.
3 weeks ago. Like, if the one bounce different in that Oregon game, and we're probably not having this conversation, but that looked like that just killed that. Like that game looked like it just tore the heart out of that team. And then those 2 successive losses, and here we are. I mean, it's unbelievable to you can, knowing what we know now, not to say that you can understand it because it's a $50 million buyout, or what the exact number is. I've seen a couple of different reports on or whatever like that. But I mean, that part alone is crazy. But to think about it, and you think the Penn State fan base, it feels like is just, I don't want to say been waiting for an excuse, but like each time they lose that big game, it's like, oh, we can't do this. We got to get rid of him. No. It's always been that kind of like building momentum to that. Because what is it? They're 4-21 against teams in the top 10, lost 17 of their last 19 against teams in the top 10.
Yeah, only favored in 2 or 3 of those.
Yeah.
Just to provide the context behind it.
So 1-10 against Ohio State, 3-7 against Michigan. All 3 of those wins against Michigan, those Michigan teams were not top 15 teams. However, this is a team that has won 10 plus games in 6 of the last 9 seasons. They went to 2 Rose Bowls. They split those. They lost in the national semifinals in Notre Dame on a field goal with 7 seconds left. I would think that most fan bases in the country would kill for what Penn State has had the last decade. Unfortunately, Penn State is not one of those fan bases. I mean, when it really comes down to it.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot to digest here, and we will have brevity because there's a lot to talk about, and also hopefully thoughtful insight. I want to start with this, and I wrote it out because I wanted to get it out accurately. I wonder if buyouts start to disappear. To your point, the amount of money that coaches have to be bought out for if they want to take another job or if they get fired. I mean, it's a 2-way street, right? Sign a head coach to a big-time job. Buyout is north of $20 million. They can't leave for their dream job, or that school has to spend a ton of money to get them. And if you decide to fire that coach, you have to pay that buyout as well. That's just how it works. And to me, it's just wild that coaches can go from brilliant to fired in 6 months, 6 weeks, 3 weeks. And to your point, every one of the situations are bespoke. I want to use one of Guy Haberman's favorite words, right? Is very specific to that locker room, to that team room, to that fan base, to that context. But it is hard for me to imagine, like I think of Penn State, not giving the head coach a chance to climb out after 2 weeks ago 3 weeks ago they're ranked number 2 in the country. Thus, it points to things that you must not know, right? Which is like, what are the dynamics going on there? Because I can't look at really any of these scenarios, and they're all different, right? Like clump UCLA in it. Like if you look at all of them, you're like, okay, let's make changes at the top or the coordinators, and that will shake out at the rest of these places, whether it's Penn State or Oregon State or UAB. Like that'll impact the staff over the next couple of days as well. It's hard to imagine that the team's better for it. Now, it is the case at UCLA. They look like a totally different team. So again, I just go back to like, we don't know what it's really like in every one of these locker rooms. And I get it. Let's just start with Penn State. The last 2 weeks have been embarrassing when you look at the standard of not only what Penn State is historically, what the expectation was this year. They decided to run it back much like Michigan did and Washington 2 years ago, much like Ohio State did last year. And in this era, when you decide to run it back, you have to throw down and pay to run it back. You're the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. You have probably one of the higher paid rosters. Let's remember last year, in advance of the CFP, Penn State made a commitment to Drew Aller, and Bo Prabula had to leave, which is jacked up, but that was the reality because they had to pay for who are you going to pay for? You only get one of them, and they both want to start, and they both want to play, and they both should play. But I come back to like the word patience. And I think for every decision maker, whether it's an AD, a booster, a brand sponsor, like everybody's got a piece of this thing in college football. Patience doesn't really exist. And it has never existed in college football. Like if you comped it to the NFL, like it's a totally different conversation. And I just wonder like who's forcing a lot of these decisions to happen. Because I look at the football and to me, I'm looking at Penn State and I'm saying, well, what if they did beat Ohio State in a couple weeks? Then like you couldn't fire them. So was it about timing to your earlier point? Or is there something that we don't really know about? And like, look, the team clearly has not played well the last 2 times out. Do they have to change things and light a spark? Oftentimes when that happens, you see a coordinator change. You see a quarterback change. Their quarterback's done for the season. So you're going to have a version of a spark. So that one, I was shocked by that. My text threads were blowing up in advance of that decision saying, you got to move on, you got to move on, got to move on. I'm sitting there like, 3 weeks ago, he's a batted ball. Like he's a fumble picked up by Penn State to send a Dante Moore on a bad snap away from the number one team in America. And you know, it just seems like in college, I'm like, wow, it just happens fast. And I don't necessarily agree with that. So let me just finish my thought on that, Jim. You make the move, cool. James Franklin is out at Penn State. And now the conversation goes to who should he get? Let's just say the top 3 names in some form of order: Marcus Freeman, Matt Rhule, Curt Cignetti, right? Huge names. They know what it's like to lead programs. They've taken programs to big time heights at a variety of different places. But because of the expanded playoff, Jim, it's near impossible to potentially get any of those 3. They're going to be in the playoff. So now, because of James Franklin being fired, which is a decision in and of itself, I would imagine at Matt Rhule's press conference this week and Curt Cignetti's press conference this week and for subsequent weeks, and Marcus Freeman, if you want to put him in, those 3 will have to answer the same question. And then their agents will start to leverage that opportunity and then get an extension and a bigger buyout, or they won't because they want the job. And if they lead a team to a playoff, it's the best thing for the school. You might argue not for the coach if he wants to end up in State College. So there's just a lot of layers to this thing. And I do think that even if Penn State beat Ohio State, even if they came all the way back, if they wanted to move on at the end of the year, they could. They could if they didn't win it all. And if they did win it all, they wouldn't. And they wouldn't be out $49 or $50 million in a buyout. So again, I'm not coming for the decision. I'm not criticizing it because I'm not in the room at all. I'm not in the locker room. But I think it's important to have like a broad perspective on this thing of like, buyouts are insane. My opinion would be, I think buyouts are going to drop. I think they're going to drop because of what the playoff has done and the extension of the season. But here we sit with one of the bluest of blue bloods being wide open in early October.
It's funny you mentioned about like the agent leveraging. You saw the story last week about like people putting out like, oh, Jedd Fisch would be interested in UCLA. Like,
come on.
Would theoretically Jedd Fisch be interested in UCLA? Probably, but right now, probably not. Like right now, that is not a better job than what he's got going on at Washington. Sorry, UCLA fans, but it's funny too because I think when you're making a move like this, and Penn State stands way far above all these other job openings currently, I think in this realm of, if you're going to get rid of Coach A, you better have a damn good Coach B coming in next year. Otherwise, you just lit $50 million on fire.
Yeah, and I'll say this for Penn State, because I think it's a fun conversation. We talk to coaches all the time, and the fun conversation to have is like, would you be interested in this job or that job or this job or that job? And in the conversation, it often goes, I don't know, could they win there? Do they have all the resources? There's 136 head coaching jobs. There's 60 whatever Power 4 jobs, and of those 60 plus, there's 20 that have it all, and among those 20, there's 10 that have it all. And Penn State's in that conversation. So not many people are turning it down. I think for the Penn State fan, you're going to get a hell of a coach. It might not be Rhule, Cignetti, Freeman. There are a lot of talented coaches out there. I just wonder where it nets out, because there's so many dynamics. And do you have to have it done by December 1st? You could argue that. You could also argue no. It could be January 1st. You could argue it all. Now, there's a lot of arguments both ways. And I'd be curious if you said, hey, wait till January 1 and you can get Curt Cignetti or Matt Rhule if they're in the playoff. Wait, right? Or what is a recruiting class? On one hand, the offensive and defensive linemen, that is the big deal. But the other positions, it's kind of where we sit in the world. You can kind of dance in the portal in that regard. So I know enough people that know Pat Kraft, the athletic director of Penn State, and hold him in such high regard. So they'll nail it. But it's worthy of a conversation of the timing of, was it too noisy outside? I don't know, should noise have a lot to do with it? When you're a blue blood, you just found $50 million for a buyout. It's worthwhile conversation is the point.
And I think the thing that what we've learned from 2 years ago in this landscape of coaching changes is you don't want to be the last team hiring the coach. You don't want to be the team when the musical chairs are all going. When we saw Kalen go from Alabama,
well, unless you're a big time one, unless you're Alabama or Penn State, you don't want to be the last.
You don't want to be the last, because at that point, your players are in the portal and nobody else's are. Yeah,
that's true. Well, there's a 3-day window that kicks off today for Penn State.
Yeah, but so you don't want to be we've seen what the Brent Brennan kind of starting behind the 8 ball at Arizona in that regard of he was the third in that line of hirings, and so when it was time for him to go out and try and bring in players, those guys have already committed to other places. So it's hard. And you're going to come, whoever this next coach is going to be, the expectation for them next year is win. There won't be any excuses oh, well, we didn't hire him until mid-January. No, that won't fly with whoever Penn State is hiring.
Do you think though, from where you sit on the West Coast, and I only say that we both sit on the West Coast, as we know, but I'm I've had a 9 a.m. game every week except week 1. So I'm basically an East Coast guy. Right. Now, do you think Penn State is a job where you've got to go to the playoff next year? Is that how you view that?
I mean, in a 12-team playoff, it's a job where you need to go to the playoff every year.
Okay. See, I don't. Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's at that. It's not quite at Ohio State level where when you don't win the national championship, it's a disappointment. But this was it was almost like the joke, oh, they expanded it to 12 so that Penn State could make it every year.
Yeah. That's a good point. do you think though, why don't you rank? Let's just be brief here because we got a lot to talk about. But best jobs in the Big Ten today. Go ahead. 1 through 5.
Ohio State number 1, clearly.
No brainer.
Probably then Oregon, just based on the momentum and everything that they have going there resources wise. Then do I go Michigan or USC? Both are in that conversation.
4-3, whatever.
And then probably Penn State would be that.
Think about that for a second. It's the part of expansion that nobody really thought about. Is the point. To me, I think 4 getting in is a pseudo lock for the Big Ten, but it's not a 100% lead pipe cinch lock. Right. It's all kind of dependent upon what's the Big 12 look like? What's the ACC look like? What's the SEC? Like, I just think like who plays who, what's the records, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying that Penn State is one of the best jobs in all of college football. And in the Big Ten, with the advent of these 4 schools, Oregon takes up a lot of oxygen. SC, we wrote about it at yoption.com. Like, SC and the Mecca might be back, folks, after the dominating win against Michigan. No, they got to prove it against Notre Dame over the weekend. They win in South Bend, which we're going to get to here in about 10 minutes. Look out. Okay, let's go Oregon State. Trent Bray, he gets let go. And I always go back to something that Ted Robinson taught me, and I lean on this word all of the time. So thank you, Ted, if you're watching. Hope. And you know me, I'm a coach defender as much as anybody. And he said, whenever you feel like you've lost hope or a team's lost hope, that's when you got to make a move. And we've seen those games. We called Colorado, Oregon when Mark Helfrich was the head coach. Ted called it walking out. Like, it's hard to survive that. Arizona, your school gets drilled by Arizona State by like 60 or whatever it was, 70. No hope. Like, it was going to be a move. Tell me, like, you're tracking the Beavs every move. Like, what did you think about that one as they still remain winless on the season?
Yeah, it's funny because I was at that Colorado at Arizona game that was Carl Durrell's last game, and you knew that like, hey, like they got to make a move, and it is like obviously with all the extracurricular is the wrong word, but like all the outside influences that were going on over the last 2 years from the moment that Jonathan Smith took that Michigan State job. With everything going on with the Pac-12 and the uncertainty, it felt like they needed Trent Bray just to keep things together. I don't know, how much of a search they actually did for that job, but they felt like we need Trent to keep this together. And you've seen from the outpouring from former players that they feel that Trent did that.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they've lost 13 of their last 14. They've got their worst start since 1991. And if you remember those Oregon State teams back in that day, like that was like every year was just hopeless. So you got to figure out a way to kind of just get that momentum back. And like, to your point of like shuffling the staff, like they fired the special teams coordinator the week before because that had been like a real weakness on that team. I mean, that Houston game, they had two blocked field goals and they lost by 3. And like, that was like, oh, that game was a heartbreaker. And then they go to App State and, oh, that game was a heartbreaker. And then this game against Wake Forest, like, it was ironic that it was Jake Dickert against Trent Bray that just, not even a year and a half ago, the two of them were on stage together in Las Vegas, like fighting together for the future of the Pac-12. And I think it's just the irony of that. And it was like, they got blown out in that game. Wake Forest had their backup quarterback in. It was just like, where else can you go from that point? Like, making another assistant change doesn't seem like that is going to change the momentum of this program. Now, can they do what Tim Skipper has now done with UCLA? I don't know. I don't know where this team can be right now for the rest of the year, but they got to figure it out. I mean, because 2 weeks ago, none of us would have said that this is where UCLA would be right now. No one in the country would have said that. So, we're gonna wait and see. They do have some talent there on that Oregon State roster, but I think they need to figure out a way to just build some buzz back into that program. I think they probably need a coach, a head coach. Their next head coach needs to be someone who has head coaching experience.
Yeah, here we sit and. Watching press conferences is one of our favorite things to do. Saturday night after a game or Sunday night late when my kids and wife are asleep, I'm just like watching coaches post-game press conferences. And your heart breaks sometimes. Mine did this weekend, watching Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. My heart broke for him because he's a hell of a coach. And they're just not a great team. Trent Bray, your heart breaks. Deshaun Foster, your heart breaks. And when you have two guys, and Deshaun and Trent, who played at the school, their dream was to literally be the head coach at the place they played at. And for it to not work out in less than 2 full seasons, is heartbreaking. And I think that Martin Jarman, the AD at UCLA, understood that. Watching Oregon State and Scott Barnes, the athletic director, I watched his interview with John Canzano. Make sure you subscribe if you don't already. I'm sure everybody does. So if you haven't, do it to John's newsletter. It's great. He had a one-on-one interview about it. Like, it breaks your heart. And I think sometimes, to your point, like, circumstances dictated the hiring. Chip Kelly leaves late. They have to figure it out at UCLA. They do. It's Deshaun Foster, no experience as a play caller or a head coach, and they struggled. Now look what happens with what they've done the last 2 weeks. I thought that Scott Barnes really nailed it in terms of, like, you could see how bad he hurt, that it didn't work out too. Because they were trying to. They gave him resources. They had money to go get a quarterback. They did the staff thing, and then he made the changes to make himself the defensive play caller, and Trent Bray and Keith Hayward went back to Cal after last season. And there's no other way to say it other than, like, it's just a bummer. Like, it was horrible to watch it unfold. And these coaches know the industry. Like, you saw it, whether it was halftime or post-game interviews or just their face on the sideline. Like, they know the deal too. And when you're losing the thing you dreamt of forever, like, you only grip it harder. And I think we saw that. Both Deshaun and Trent will be much better for this experience down the line, because they're both really incredible coaches at their respective area of expertise, whether it be running back, leading that group, whether it be defense and leading that side of the ball. But I hated seeing it, Jim. I'm not going to lie to you, because he fought so hard. And watching that game, I mean, I went to So About That Stat, subscribe to that too, Jim Thormey's newsletter at Substack, and you put the photo up of the three of us last 2 media days, I guess, ago. And it's the three of us on stage, and I'm sitting there like, wow, like, one guy's at Wake Forest, and his team just drilled the other guy's team, and now he's out of a job. Like, it's just nuts when you think of, like, things you couldn't have predicted. So now where does Oregon State go from here? Let's just put a bow on it. It's a tough dance. Like, you can go get a Jimmy Rogers, right? A proven coach at a lower level or at a similar level, right? Like, can you go to a Mountain West and find a successful coach and say, come coach in the Pac-12? Like Dan Mullen maybe is an example. Is Oregon State a better job than UNLV? I would think so. I think there's more resources there. But I also been around Barry Odom enough to know, like, what he did at UNLV launched him to his next job, and it's a big job. Does Dan Mullen land in the Big Ten? Does he land in the SEC? Does he land in a big-time job after the season? I would project he would, just based on his pedigree. And look what he's doing this season. He's got UNLV undefeated with a win over UCLA. So the other side of that coin is, like, do you get, like, a bigger name? And I just go back to the point we had earlier. There's only so many jobs. And what Scott Barnes said in his interview is what Trent Bray has said in many of his interviews with us here. Oregon State has a path to the playoff. And I agree with that. Next year in the Pac-12, it's the best non-Power 4 program, conference. You go 10-2, like, you go win that league, you're going to go. Challenge is now you got to nail this hire, man, because here comes San Diego State. Here comes Fresno State. Tim Skipper, if they don't keep him at UCLA, he's going to get a huge job. Like, here it comes. So it's a pivotal time for the Beavs.
Yeah, and like I said, there's 8 jobs open right now, but those 8 jobs are likely to be filled a heavy percentage, by guys that are already current FBS coaches. So the wheel will just keep turning in that respect. So you just got to keep, like I said, you just got to stay ahead of the musical chairs there.
You know what's interesting is, like, just a quick note on that. So I get asked a lot about North Texas and Texas State, just because of Eric Morris and the ties there. And then, of course, Texas State joining the Pac-12 and their head coach. Those two guys are hot names in the world. But, like, are they going to Oklahoma State or Arkansas? Or are they coming to the Pac and to Oregon State? Like, it's a really unique year, I think, in that regard of, like, some of these rock star trendy coaches. Or, like, do you go get Ben Arbuckle, right? Or is he saying, no, I want to sit and wait because I'm going to make 2.5, leverage that opportunity into making more money as an OC? Like, I always go to Will Stein. I think he's reported, like, he and Tosh are both making either right around 2 or a little more than $2 million to be coordinators. Like, on one hand, that's a hell of a job at Oregon. You can sit tight and wait for the perfect opportunity. Or do you want to the point of 136? Like, do you want to be a head coach so bad? Like, you got to go get Tosh Lupo. You got to go get Will Stein. Like, and do they entertain it? Like, those are discussions that I think are worthy to have. So, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, because you mentioning Oregon brings up to me, the craziest stat so far of this whole thing is that now of Oregon's 5 wins so far this season, 3 of those head coaches have now since let go. Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State, Trent at Oregon State, and James Franklin at Penn State. So it's just like, it's crazy. And they won't even play UCLA, which is like the funny part of this whole conference realignment thing this year. So I figured before we go onto the next topic, I just wanted to slide in that Oregon stat there.
All right. So we're going to put to bed here the coaching carousel. For Trent, I love him in UAB. I know it didn't work out, but I will say this, and all these guys that are out, the head coaches poured so much into it. And the part that always gets lost, and I hope this part is the part of the interview here that gets a little bit of love on the internet, around 300 people are impacted every time a head coach is fired. So I get it. I don't feel bad for James Franklin in that narrative. He's making $50 million. I get it. It makes sense. But there's a quality control coach making $17,000 and an assistant wide receiver coach making $35,000. And there's many of my friends on the UAB staff that are making less than $100,000 that have multiple kids and just had newborns. Like, that part is the real part. And that part is the part that gets no love. And now away we got to go. And not only figure out your life and health insurance come February, but also every coach I've talked to has echoed the same thing, which I love, which is they're like, we're making it about the players. UCLA doing that, focusing on the players. And I'll say this, and we put this on social, to the players of every team whose head coach has been fired, you will remember this season more than any season in your lifetime. You will remember the season more than any season in your football life. So what will you choose to do? And I will urge you to compete, to connect to your locker mate, to your teammate, to your friends, to people within that organization in an uncommon way. In an uncommon way. It's easy to go look at where can I get another offer? Where can I get DM'd and find my next school? Where can I blame, complain, or deflect? Who wants to hear me blank and moan all day long? Like, don't. Do you have the discipline to compete and throw down to have the most memorable year in your football life? And if you do that, maybe you'll be like UCLA right now because they're on a run. And Tim Skipper, what he is doing, and Jerry Neuheisel, and that program, and Nico Imaliava, like this team in a vacuum of 2 weeks, Jim, they look like a top third of the Big Ten team right now. It's just facts. So can you do that in Penn State and Happy Valley, in Birmingham, Alabama, in Corvallis, in Stillwater? Like, can you throw the hell down? That's the challenge.